The narrative begins by introducing us to a couple, Saga and her husband John. They are happy because they are moving to a new home, the house where Saga's grandparents lived and where she spent much of her childhood, located deep in a Finnish forest. When they arrive at the house, John is enchanted by the beauty of the place and the forest, although he finds the presence of some debris thrown in front of the house strange. When they enter, they realize that the house is already quite deteriorated and that John will need to make some repairs. Saga then shows her old room to her husband and says that she used to stay there with her sister Taru when they visited their grandparents. John opens the room's curtains and notices that there is a plant growing in the middle of it. Saga then recalls the exact position of the furniture when she was a child and says where theirs will be, including the baby's crib she intends to have with John. John realizes that his wife is very excited about the move, which also makes him happy for her. They begin to dance through the house, showing the happiness they feel, and then go for a walk in the forest. However, something catches John's shirt along the way, and he stops to observe it, while Saga continues walking ahead. John continues observing the forest and sees a tree whose trunk looks like a face, then another that resembles a fallen person. Meanwhile, Saga finds a tree that she seems to already know. She kisses it and hugs it. John looks for her in the middle of the forest, and Saga suddenly appears, frightening him. She says that she used to go there hidden from her grandmother, who forbade her from entering the forest because she said that it claimed what was owed to it. Then, she asks John to make her a mother, and the two have a romantic moment in the forest. Sometime later, Saga gives birth to her son, but after the delivery, the midwives notice something strange about the child, which worries her. When she wakes up sometime later, John visits her carrying a bouquet of flowers. She asks if everything is all right with their son, and he replies that it is, and she asks to see him. The midwife arrives and helps John hand the baby to Saga. When she holds him in her arms, she realizes that the boy is covered in hair all over his body, while the doctor says she has never seen a child like that, but assures them that the boy was born healthy. They then return home, with Saga needing to use crutches to walk because she is still recovering from childbirth, but wanted to be discharged earlier. On the way, she hears a sound coming from the middle of the forest, but when she turns around, she sees nothing. When they enter the house, the baby, whom they named Christian, cries a lot, and Saga tells John that he is hungry. She then goes to the child's room, sits in an armchair, and John hands her the baby so she can breastfeed him. While doing this, Saga feels a lot of pain because the boy bites her and she turns her face away. But John reminds her that the midwife said eye contact was essential. After placing him in the crib, Saga touches her belly and realizes that the baby cries at each touch of hers and that she herself also feels pain when touching him, which leaves her intrigued. Later, she sings a lullaby to make him sleep, but he does not stop crying. John then says that the boy simply does not want to sleep alone and takes him to sleep with them in bed. While they are lying down, the baby manages to lift his head on his own, even though he is a newborn, and looks at his mother. John, who is more religious, says that this is a small miracle and that it matches the name Christian. However, Saga asks if he really thinks that name matches the boy. In the middle of the night, while John and Christian sleep, Saga removes her son's small hand from on top of her and tries to lie down more comfortably. However, the baby soon comes closer, hugs her, and ends up making her arm bleed. The next day, Saga's mother, Kaisa, and her sister, Taru, go to the house to help take care of the child. Saga presents the house to them, but her mother says that she is pushing herself too hard while still postpartum, but Taru supports her, encourages her, and says that they are there to help. Saga shows the baby's room, and Taru is impressed by the care and the details she prepared. Kaisa asks how long her daughter intends to stay without working, and Saga replies that it will be 5 years, because she wants to have 2 more children. Kaisa is surprised by the idea, but Taru says that this phase of life is essential for the mother to be present, besides being a period that never comes back. At that moment, John arrives with Christian, who continues crying a lot. Taru comments that he seems to be hungry and asks if he has already been fed, and Saga replies that he has. Then, Kaisa questions why they decided to live in such a wild place. John replies that they only wanted their son to grow up in contact with nature. Kaisa, however, recalls that Saga always liked trees more than people and says that as a child, she was antisocial and that the other children mocked her for that behavior. At that instant, the baby grabs Kaisa's earring and pulls it with such force that he tears the accessory from her ear. Everyone becomes worried, but she does not show much panic and only asks for her first aid kit. Later, Kaisa is stitching her own wound when Saga arrives. She comments that she does not think it is normal for such a small child to have so much strength and wonders if there is something wrong with the baby. However, Kaisa says that Saga was exactly like that when she was a newborn. The next day, some of Saga and John's relatives and friends arrive to congratulate them on the birth of their son, and Saga welcomes them happily. She shows Christian to the visitors, while the baby continues crying a lot. One of the children cannot hide her strange look when seeing him, and Saga notices. As they move away, she hears the girl ask her mother why the baby looked so strange, while the mother tells her to be quiet. When she is alone with Christian, Saga observes the guests' behavior and conversations, and although no one is saying anything offensive, begins to deduce that they are all criticizing him. She tries to calm the baby once again, until a breeze coming from the forest blows over the two of them, making him finally stop crying. At that moment, John arrives, takes the baby to present him to the guests, and announce his name. While he talks with the visitors, Saga again hears a noise coming from the forest and feels another breeze blowing from there. When John is about to announce the baby's name, Saga interrupts him, calls the boy Kura, and says that this is his true name. Everyone applauds the revelation, but the baby starts crying again, and Saga notices a red stain on his arm. She then takes him in her arms and moves him away from the others. When she reaches the child's room, she looks at the arm and sees that the wound had worsened. Later, she says goodbye to the visitors and explains that she was not feeling very well. Her mother reminds her not to forget to take care of herself. The two hug and say goodbye. When she closes the door, Saga asks John if he is angry with her. He replies that he thinks the name Kura is beautiful, but that a decision like that needs to be made by both of them, otherwise it makes no sense. She then says that nothing she does seems to be right for him, and that he keeps trying to correct her and giving her orders. In the end, however, she apologizes for changing the name. John hugs her, and she asks why he does not kiss her anymore. He replies that he still kisses her, explains that all of this was new and different for both of them, and says that she was the best mother in the world. Even so, Saga insists that there is something strange about Kura, calling him that. But John corrects her, saying that she meant he, and states that the boy is only sensitive to sunlight. Sometime later, Saga takes her son for a walk in the forest, while Taru accompanies her, asking her not to shake the stroller too much. They stop at a certain point, and the boy finally falls asleep, since he had not slept during the night. Sometime later, when he wakes up, Taru comments that he is smiling, but Saga says that he never smiles. When she looks at Kura, she sees no smile at all and says that it was only a grimace. Soon afterward, the boy begins crying again. At that moment, they hear a noise in the forest, similar to the sound of tree trunks moving, and Kura immediately becomes silent again. Back at the house, John and Taru are removing some debris from the front of the property, when Taru recalls something their grandmother used to say. She says that, before dying, their grandmother called her, saying that those objects kept them away. John asks if she was talking about the neighbors, but Taru implies that she is referring to something else, without explaining exactly what. She adds that their grandmother said cold iron kept them away, but says that she talked a lot of nonsense, and comments that she lived in her own world. At night, Saga is sitting on the bed when John notices a large bulge on her back. He approaches and caresses her shoulder. At that moment, Saga notices that the baby is sleeping and finds it strange because he could never sleep during the night. John then reassures her and tells her to enjoy that moment. However, when Saga looks at the crib, she realizes that Kura is sitting up. John says that this is normal for a child and continues to kiss her, but Saga asks him to stop. At that instant, Kura starts crying again. She apologizes and says that John needs to rest, while she will take care of the boy. Saga takes him to another room and stays there, waiting for him to sleep. Suddenly, her phone rings, and she realizes that she had fallen asleep. When she looks at the crib, she notices that the baby is no longer there. She searches the room and finds him on the floor of the room, not understanding how he managed to get out of the crib. Then, she answers her mother's call while observing the child, who is near a flower that sprouted from the floor and crossed through the rug. Kesa tries to talk to her daughter and comments that she forgot that, where Saga lives, it was still night. Then, she asks what she wanted to talk about, since she had tried to call earlier. Saga then asks what her grandmother used to say about the forest, because she always said there was something dangerous in it. Kaisa replies that this was just one of the stories her grandmother used to tell, saying that there was something mysterious in that forest. Saga then ignores the call and begins to examine the flower, tearing away part of the rotten wooden floor around it. When she opens the hole, she sees the plant's roots along with several insects. Suddenly, one of the roots wraps around her arm and pulls her into the opening. The next morning, John wakes her up, and she realizes that she had fallen asleep on the floor, beside the hole. Saga explains that there was something under the floor, where the flower had sprouted. John also finds it strange that the plant was born there, but when he looks at the clock, he realizes that he is already late for work. She says that he can go because she will be fine. Later, unable to bear the pain she feels when breastfeeding her son, Saga puts her milk in a bottle to give it to him. But Kura knocks over the glass bottle, which falls to the floor and shatters. She puts him on the floor and begins picking up the shards, but ends up cutting her hand and spilling blood on the floor. When she tries to remove the piece of glass from her hand, she witnesses an astonishing scene. Her son is on the floor, drinking her own blood that dripped onto a plate. Faced with this, she decides to take him to the pediatrician. The doctor states that although the boy is healthy, he has hypersensitivity to touch and light, as well as being large for his age, with strong and well-developed muscles. Saga then reports that he even drank her blood, and the pediatrician suggests that perhaps he was so hungry that he ended up putting everything he found into his mouth. Then, she explains how to identify when the baby is hungry and asks if Saga is under any pressure. She replies no, and states that in truth, the problem is the baby himself. However, John comments, trying to be respectful, that perhaps the problem is the way she is feeling about her son. The pediatrician explains that it is perfectly normal for a mother to have difficult feelings about her baby, and says that she can schedule an appointment to help her. John is pleased with the suggestion, but Saga feels that she is being questioned even more. They return home in the rain, and John comments that in the end, everything seems to have gone well. However, Saga says that she will never breastfeed her son again. John tries to understand her and says that all of this is part of the way she is dealing with motherhood, but she becomes furious, telling him not to try to say what she is feeling. At that moment, a car arrives, and John says that it is his parents. Saga enters the house, while Maddie and Elena reunite with their son. They enter, greet Saga, and Maddie gives them an iron ornament made by himself as a gift, for which she thanks him. Maddie, who is Catholic, asks John to bring the child so he can bless him. While John goes to get him, Elena comments that she heard old local legends according to which, if a child were not blessed, the trolls would take it, and wonders if anyone still believes that. Saga replies that no one does anymore. Elena then jokes, saying that this is why some families still have troll blood running through their veins, leaving Saga not understanding what she meant. At that moment, John returns with the baby, and Elena is enchanted to see him. In a joking tone, she comments that, luckily for them, trolls are afraid of holy water, so they can still save him. Maddie then says an initial prayer to bless the child, while Elena tells her son that he was very upset when he learned that the boy's name had been changed, although he never showed it. After a prayer, Maddie pours holy water over the baby's head and blesses him. After that, while Elena talks about what it was like to care for John when he was a child, they are interrupted by the baby's intense crying and run to see what happened. When they reach the living room, they find Maddie holding the child, saying that he did nothing to him. John takes Kura from his arms and notices that his hands are marked by a reddish stripe. Then, he asks his father what he did. Maddie picks up a piece of iron and says that it is not hot and that there is no fire nearby. But John becomes irritated with his father and leaves the place carrying his son. After he leaves, Maddie tells Saga that he only touched the boy with that cold iron. Upon hearing this, she seems to realize something and has a fit of laughter. When she is alone with the child in the room, Saga says that she knows who he is, because she remembers what her grandmother said about the protection offered by cold iron. She then searches among the groceries she had bought, takes a bottle of animal blood and a baby bottle. Then, she pours the blood into the bottle and offers it to Kura, who drinks calmly until he falls asleep. At that moment, John arrives home calling for Saga, and she quickly hides the bottle of blood in the hole in the rotten floor, under the rug. While they eat dinner, John offers to help feed the baby, but Saga says that for now, it is better for her to take care of it alone. After dinner, the couple argues because Saga still had not scheduled the appointment at the children's health clinic. She then says that he should trust her more and give her a little more space. Upon hearing this, John withdraws and leaves the house. Saga tries to go after him, but it is already too late. At that moment, Kura starts crying again, and she is taken by fury. She goes to the crib and begins screaming in front of the child. Soon afterward, a loud sound of trees moving is heard, and when she looks through the window, Saga sees several branches surrounding the house. However, she wakes up lying on the floor and realizes that it was all nothing more than a dream. When she looks at the bitten arm, she sees Kura on the floor right in front of her. Kura stands up, remains standing on his own, and begins walking toward his mother. Desperate, Saga grabs an iron trident and begins keeping him away. At that moment, her mother calls, and she manages to pick up the phone to answer. Saga locks herself in the bathroom and closes the door while the child bangs aggressively outside. Kaisa asks what that noise is, and Saga explains that it is her son. Then, she says that she is thinking about doing something wrong before something worse happens to her. Desperate, she asks the child to go away. Suddenly, she sees herself in the middle of the snow-covered forest. In the distance, she hears Kura's screams and, following the sound, finds him over a dead rabbit, drinking its blood. When she returns home, she finds John, who asks where she was and asks her to come inside. Already inside the house, Saga looks for the bottle of blood to feed Kura, but John appears holding the package and asks what the explanation for that is. She says that Kura does not drink milk and tries to pull the bottle from his hands. During the struggle, the package ruptures and the blood spreads over the two of them. John leaves the room furious to clean himself and, when he returns, finds Saga still covered in blood, rocking their son's crib. He then says that she is no longer the same person and suggests that she take a day to go into town, meet some friends, and try to find herself again, while he would take care of Kura alone. Saga agrees with the idea and goes to town to spend some time away from home. During the meeting with her friends, she tries to talk about work and other subjects, but everyone only wants to know about her son. Feeling uncomfortable, she also hears the cry of a child nearby and becomes disturbed. While eating, she begins to feel an intense itch and her skin becomes red. Her friends ask if she has some allergy, but Saga only says that she needs to leave. Before leaving, she takes a piece of meat from the kitchen and puts it in her bag. When she arrives home, she takes the child from John's arms and takes him to the room. There, she realizes that her skin returns to normal when she stays near the baby. Then, she places the piece of meat on the floor and offers it for Kura to eat. The next morning, during breakfast, Saga and Taru talk about how difficult it has been to take care of Kura. Meanwhile, Anna, Taru's daughter, goes to play with Kura, who seems to lure her to another room, out of the mother's sight. Suddenly, they hear the girl's screams and run desperately to see what happened. Saga pushes Kura away by letting out a growl, and Taru realizes that one of Anna's fingers has been torn off. She then runs to take the girl to the hospital with John, while blaming Saga for Kura's behavior. Saga then bursts into tears while Kura watches her. Then, she uncovers the floor, removes a piece of meat from the hole, and throws it for Kura to eat. When she looks at another piece she is holding in her hand, she brings it to her mouth and also begins to eat the raw meat. Later, Saga is shown playing with Kura, but both show increasingly animalistic behaviors and seem to have fun together. The next day, when John enters his son's room, he finds Saga and Kura lying down, nestled inside the hole in the floor, which leaves him completely stunned. During lunch, John tries to control Kura so that he will eat, but Saga only lets out a growl at the boy, who immediately calms down. John tries to give him pureed food, but Kura throws the food in his face. When he tries again, the boy begins to cry, and Saga stands up, throws a plate, and says that the metal hurts him. She leaves the room, and when she returns, places a piece of meat on the table, which Kura immediately devours. The scene leaves John in shock, and he tries to take the meat from the child, but Saga lets out a scream, ordering him to leave him alone. Later, while Kura sleeps, Saga apologizes to her husband. However, John replies that now he finally knows who she really is, and says that everything that happened is her fault. He says that Saga should never have been a mother and calls her a monster. Then, he says that he will take Kura away from her. When he tries to pick up the child, the two enter a struggle and end up falling to the floor. Kura flees the room, while the two go out in pursuit of him, with Saga behaving like an animal. When Kura returns to the room, John and Saga begin grabbing each other and growling at each other like two beasts, while the child watches everything crying. Suddenly, with Kura's crying growing increasingly intense, enormous tree branches invade the house and begin destroying it, while an even larger branch emerges from the hole in the middle of the room. When everything calms down, Saga looks at John and realizes that he was pierced by an enormous branch, with his body falling to the floor, already lifeless. Soon afterward, she sees little Kura approaching and drinking his own father's blood. Then, driven by instinct, she approaches the body and also begins to feed on it. At the end of the film, Kura heads toward the forest, while Saga sees a tree-like creature approaching him. She also realizes that all the trees move in response to her son's scream and finally accepts what Kura is and what she herself has become.